Thanks very much, Kimmy. I don't know whether I've still got, probably not, no. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for me to talk, and I hope my internet is going to survive this process. It was fantastic to hear about Born in Bradford, and particularly those sort of references to actual research that you've done. I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of TwinsUK as a cohort and think about how we might leverage data from twins across the UK to understand the interplay between social, environmental conditions and health across the life course. So a little bit first, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about TwinsUK, what we are, what we've been studying for the last 25 or more years, then go through a little bit about the biosocial data we have within the cohort, how we reflect the UK population, and how we might use twins as a quasi-experimental design to really dissect what the impact of certain social factors might be upon health. And two sort of like themes that I'm going to take you through is one around imagining diverging destinies between individuals that might have different social and economic conditions, their effects on their physical over the life course. And then as Rosie's been talking about geospatial and environmental factors in health and how we might be able to use them within TwinsUK. So we've been running since 1992, so we're a longitudinal cohort. We've been co-funded by the Wellcome for some years, and we've principally been engaged in understanding disease and understanding health in the context of the changing understanding around genomics, from the GWAS era through to understanding about epigenetics, about expression of genes, about metabolomics, and more recently about the interaction between the microbiome within us all and how that relates to health. And in the last sort of 4 years, we've been looking at dynamic phenotyping. So how does, for example, your blood glucose change in response to a certain food challenge, and that might be different between different people. So we have a lot of health data and a lot of biological data in the cohort. We've got about 8,000 individuals that have visited the department and have done studies with us over the years, and we invite people up on a 4-yearly rolling basis. And the cohort is, by happenstance, really, it's a predominantly female cohort, although we do have male twins as well. This is a little bit of another diagram about how we fit in with 2 other sort of sister cohorts that we are often engaged with. So the ALSVAC cohort has a number of similar phenotyping and similar multi-omics typing done, and so does the TEDS cohort, which is the other twins cohort, which a little bit like Born in Bradford is a birth cohort of twins that are again across the whole UK, just like TwinsUK is. But TwinsUK, as you'll see, is an adult cohort predominantly, although we do now enroll twins from birth. And so we've been primarily focused about diseases of aging and how things change as we develop in later life. So in the visits to the department, people come in for detailed clinical assessment, including eyes here depicted and DEXA scanning, as well as blood tests, which are for a number of those omics we've mentioned. And it generally takes a full day for those clinical visits to happen. We see about 1,000 individuals a year on a rolling basis. And so that has led to a number of variable types. We've got biochemical measures, clinical measures on physiological function, and self-reported measures, and now linked data sets coming soon from health records data about diseases and medications people are taking. And so there's a large number of tissue types that we've had, and we've done very deep phenotyping in these individuals with large numbers of individuals having quite detailed multi-omics assessment. But of course, relevant to all you guys, we realize that social inequalities are a very fundamental cause of health outcomes. And of course, we've seen in the coronavirus pandemic how many people have said that families are like ships in a storm. One family may do very differently to another family, even given the same conditions, based on some social inequalities that happen. So we're very interested in moving into the space of understanding the impact of social inequalities upon biological and health metrics, and hence I'm very interested in collaborating with any of you. And so, of course, we've been focusing mainly on the individual factors, the biology in the center of this sort of classical model, and in relationship with individual life factors, for example, diet and physical activity. But we do also have much wider data that I'm going to show you a little bit about, where we can look at how living and working conditions and general socioeconomic and cultural and environmental conditions might be affecting the individual. So could twins, this is what I want to sort of give you the idea of, could twins offer a natural experiment to understand key biosocial questions? So individuals who are twins have a lot of biology in common because they share genotype, and they share a lot of early in life environment as well. And so as they go through life, could the differences that they come across, could that impact their health in different ways? And could we detect that using longitudinal twin cohort? So here you might have two individuals that start off in the same way, the same in life, but one of them ends up getting dementia and the other one appears resilient to dementia. So what one thing we've been focusing on over the last 20 years is what early markers could predict outcome within those twin pairs. But of course, there's also the really important question about what social and life choices and events that have happened to them, which might differentiate the paths that they follow. And what differences in biology are then reflecting those different events. So these are the questions that we're intending to study over the next phase of our research. So how does TwinsUK compare to the UK population? Well, first, before we go on to that, our twin pairs that have visited are roughly half and half identical twins and non-identical twins. We have slightly more identical twins in the cohort. This UZ is undetermined zygosity. So these are individuals that we haven't necessarily been able to really define exactly whether they're identical or non-identical, and probably means we need to visit them more, that we need to get biological samples from them. But the cohort, I mean, I'm a geriatrician, so you'll understand why I'm interested in this cohort, because unlike Born in Bradford, we're really focused on the later parts of the life. So here's the UK-wide population. Obviously, we see this increase in sort of baby boomers, and those are the individuals that are within our cohort. But you can see we're disproportionately female as opposed to male. We do have a range of ethnicity, but it is less than the general population. So here on the left, that's TwinsUK's ethnic makeup. These are individuals that have visited, and so we have full biological samples. We actually have slightly better ethnic coverage of individuals that are on the registry, and one of our jobs is going to be to make sure that they are engaged and can come to visits, and we'll be using postal collections to be able to really maximize our ability to cover those individuals. In terms of income brackets, our twins are generally from the middling income bracket from the population. So we do underrepresent individuals that are very high income brackets and underrepresent individuals at very low income brackets. But the really interesting thing from point of view of how twins can be used as a quasi-experimental design is that we have a lot of twins that are discordant in terms of their income category later life. And so those individuals could be quite a good experimental design to perhaps look at impact of something like income on health outcomes. Likewise, with index of multiple deprivation, this is sort of similar to the graph that Rosie showed, but you can see that in TwinsUK, we disproportionately represent individuals that come from an area which is considered to be of lower levels of deprivation. But again, we have significant numbers of twins that come from different levels of, live in different areas and live in either urban or rural settings. Many twins live apart from each other. This is the map of where the twins come from all of the UK. But you can see here, these lines indicate differences between where the twins live. Many of them live quite apart from each other and therefore have some different environmental exposures. Just thinking about some of the social data that we have on the twins, and thanks to Ruth Bowyer, who asked Rosie that question about green space, because she sort of collated all the social data that we have in TwinsUK over the last 25 or so years. And we have data already on a number of domains, and that is increasing all the time. And we have particular focuses with some biosocial sciences, particularly Anne McMunn from UCL, who's interested in working on social connectedness and how we increase this social support domain. I'm going to just talk about two of these, about how we might use twins in relation to these things. Oh, excuse me, sorry, I'm going to... somebody's calling me. I will close that off. So in terms of working habits and patterns, I'm going to just show you some data on history of unemployment and full-time caregiving roles. In TwinsUK cohort, 89% of respondents say that they've spent some time in unemployment. And in fact, we have a number of people who are discordant pairs for the time that they've spent in employment. And interestingly, as you find in many traits, actually, there's slightly more similarity between the histories in regard to this in twins, in identical twins to non-identical twins, which means, and I mean, that's not really to say that we're suggesting that unemployment is a genetic factor. It's really to say that actually there is value in looking at twins, because we know that when something is heritable to some degree, that's when you can get added power and interest in looking at identical twins within a model. There's a graph showing the discordant pairs and the difference between the MZs and the DZs being slightly more similar to each other in the MZ group. Full-time caregiving roles, we asked people whether they've ever worked as a housewife, a full-time parent or a carer. And we have a good number of twins who have very different life histories with regard to that, just as an illustration of some of the social differences that we could unpick. Oh, sorry about this. In terms of life events as well, when we've asked people about history of abuse, for example, we know that there are pairs of twins that have experienced very different life events as well within their life. We've been interested in the last couple of years in thinking about how the world is changing, and in particular, obviously, off on the left shows how the population over 65 is thought to grow over the next few years. And of course, the coronavirus pandemic may impact that to a certain degree, considering the fact that people over 65 are disproportionately affected by coronavirus. But also there's this other change that obviously we all know about, which is environmental changes. And so we're interested in how those two features might interact over the next decades. Again, just showing you that UK, we represent the whole of the UK with twin pairs coming from all regions of the UK. And so we can look at, as Rosie sort of talked about, how different environmental factors that we can measure either through linkage with other data sets or using ONS data on IMD, etc., based on postcode, we can look at how these things are different between twins. I'm going to talk again about green space and about urban-rural living very briefly. So it's no surprise, Rosie, that Ruth asked you that question, because she's done a lot of work on mapping green space today, for example, note differences, for example, in terms of your body mass index in relation to green space when you co-vary for other things, a little similar to what you found with depression. But we've seen the influence of this sort of geography on many health phenotypes and also on biological phenotypes like the epigenome and changes the gut microbiome of individuals that live in different areas, either or in relation to green space. In COVID times, obviously we've responded to the pandemic, and one of the things that we did right early in March is get funding for and apply for a questionnaire assessment of TwinsUK at 3 time points, and now we're planning a 4th time point in terms of the experience that they had from a social, environmental, behavioural point of view within the cohort. And this data is not yet on our website, but it is something that we're keen to share, and we'll be putting out a data note very soon. In due course. That's something that has, obviously because of the pandemic, we had to push forward some of the ideas that we had to deal with social science questions that we were interested in. In September, we were going to put out a specific questionnaire around social connectedness and loneliness experience within the twins, which we're still planning to do, but it's obviously been majorly affected by the impact of the pandemic. And so we're going to do that after the pandemic, but we're very keen to collaborate with others as well, and we can change the questionnaires that we put in light of what's needed for scientists. So hopefully that's been an interesting introduction to the TwinsUK cohort. Our data is available. Our data access, managed access meeting meets weekly. It requires an application to be made to apply for data, which is, like Rosie's very simple form, requires people just to say what their research question is and how they intend to answer that question with the TwinsUK data. And the data phenotypes and data types are available on our website as well, so people can look through. And we're very keen to have conversations if needed about that. We do have, just like Born in Bradford, a cost recovery fee in place. It's about £750, which is a blanket fee to cover sort of the gathering together of any data. But of course, if you wanted to do a specific questionnaire, then that would need to have its extra costs looked at. It's on a cost basis. But we do have some funds in our current grant for PhD students in social science to gain our data without needing to pay for the access fee. So that may be of interest to some people. Thank you.